Let me start with a simple but uncomfortable truth. For most of my life, I was my own worst enemy. No matter how much I wanted success, I kept getting in my own way. Procrastination, self-doubt, fear of failure. I wasn't lazy, and I wasn't lacking ambition. What I was lacking was the right mindset. One day I came across a piece of research that changed everything. It wasn't a quote or a motivational video. I didn't have to be stuck. I could train my brain to think differently, to act differently, to succeed. It was a scientific study showing how the human brain is not fixed. It can adapt, restructure, and even rewire itself based on how we think and what we do. This process is called neuroplasticity, and once I understood how it worked, I realized something powerful. This video is the story of how I rewired my brain for success, backed by science, shaped by experience, and built on real, lasting change. It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. And if you've ever felt stuck or limited by your thoughts, this story might show you that change is not only possible, it's within your control. Let's dive in. Where they went, what patterns kept repeating. I didn't judge myself, I just watched. Like a scientist studying a subject, I had to give my brain something new to work with. So I began replacing the old patterns bit by bit. When you vividly imagine yourself performing a task successfully, the same brain regions activate as when you actually do it. Focused, confident, present. I didn't just see it, I felt it. I imagined walking into a meeting and speaking with clarity. I imagined finishing work without distraction. I imagined taking action despite fear. You're rehearsing success before it happens. Most of us grow up believing that we are the way we are. Some people are confident, some aren't. Some are disciplined, some aren't. But neuroscience tells a different story. The first step was understanding how my brain actually worked. The brain is like a muscle. It strengthens the parts you use most. The brain can't fully distinguish between imagined and real experiences. So, with repetition, those visualizations began forming real pathways, and those pathways made it easier to act in alignment with that version of myself. That voice is what psychologists call the default mode network, the part of the brain that activates during rest, often feeding us. So if you constantly think negatively, doubt yourself, or avoid discomfort, those neural pathways become dominant. That's not a motivational line, that's science. And I feel tired, I'll still change into workout clothes and do 10 minutes. It sounds small, but it makes a massive difference. You're preparing your brain to follow through. Even when resistance shows up, they get reinforced. Your brain gets better at being afraid, distracted, or overwhelmed. On the other hand, if you practice focus, gratitude, persistence, and action, your brain literally reshapes itself to support those behaviors. I realized I had spent years strengthening the wrong circuits in my brain. Every time I scrolled endlessly on my phone instead of working, I was reinforcing avoidance. Every time I said I can't, I was training my mind to believe it. Every excuse, every delay, every limiting belief was carving deeper grooves into how my brain operated. So the first shift was awareness. I had to stop running on autopilot. I began observing my thoughts. The second shift was intention. I couldn't just hope things would change. One of the first tools I used was vision, not in a fantasy way, in a neurological way. Athletes have used this for years. Every morning I would close my eyes for a few minutes and imagine myself showing up fully. At first, it felt fake, like I was lying to myself, but that's the point. I also started practicing something called implementation intentions. It's a term from psychology that basically means planning for obstacles in advance. Instead of saying I'll work out tomorrow, I would say if it's 6 p.m. and resistance will show up. Every time I tried to level up, a voice in my head told me I wasn't ready. To quiet that voice, I began meditating. Not for an hour, just 5 to 10 minutes daily. At first it was frustrating. My mind wandered constantly. But over time, I noticed something profound. It wasn't my thoughts. I was the observer of those thoughts. That tiny gap between awareness and reaction gave me control. Simple things, a productive day, a kind word, a moment of clarity. Meditation began strengthening my prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making and focus. It also reduced activity in the default mode network. The more I practiced, the quieter the noise became. Another tool I used was gratitude journaling. Every evening I wrote down 3 things I was grateful for. After making coffee, I'd write down my top 3 tasks for the day. These tiny actions triggered bigger momentum, and over time, they became automatic. This wasn't just about positivity. Rewiring your brain doesn't require massive effort all at once. Other days I wanted to quit. There were moments of doubt, of slipping back into old patterns. But the difference was, I now had tools. I knew how to reset. I didn't spiral. I recalibrated. It was about returning to the version of me that had been buried under years of unhelpful habits and noise. It was about aligning with clarity, focus, and purpose. But because I had more control over how I used it, it requires consistent, small actions that align with who you want to become. How you structure your day, how you talk to yourself, how you recover from distraction. Instead of overhauling my entire routine, I attached new habits to existing ones. but I was intentional, and that made all the difference. Gratitude has been shown to rewire the dopaminergic system in the brain. That's the reward pathway. By focusing on what was going well, I trained my brain to seek more of it. My mindset shifted from scarcity to opportunity. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when I understood the power of habit stacking. Your brain is not fixed. You are not stuck. Every moment is a chance to train your mind toward the life you want. After brushing my teeth, I'd read one page of a book. Your brain is always adapting to its environment. So I curated my environment to reflect growth, learning, and empowerment. Your brain starts to believe you, and belief is powerful. That's the key. Every time you act in alignment with your desired identity, you reinforce it. Slowly, my external world began to reflect my internal shift. I also became extremely mindful of my inputs, what I consumed. Podcasts replaced background noise. Books replaced endless feeds. Conversations became more intentional. But let me be clear, this process wasn't linear. Some days I felt unstoppable. Success, I learned, is not a destination. It's a neurological pattern of thought and behavior. It's how you respond to setbacks. Rewiring my brain for success wasn't about becoming someone else. And as I applied these tools, results started to follow. Not overnight, but steadily. I took action more consistently. I communicated more clearly. I felt more energized. Not because I had more time. Most importantly, I felt peace. A deep sense of confidence, not based on external outcomes, but on internal alignment. I wasn't perfect. So if you're watching this and wondering if you can change the way you think, the way you work, the way you live, know this. The science is clear. Your thoughts shape your brain. Your actions shape your identity. And your habits shape your future. Start small, start now. And remember, every time you choose growth over comfort, you are literally rewiring your brain for success. That's not just a mindset. That's neuroscience.